Night on the Mediterranean, a wind with a name and a temper. Sailors on a grain ship out of Alexandria watched clouds stack like walls and listened for the pitch change that meant weather turning. They had a prisoner aboard, a thin man with the eyes of a teacher and the scars of a brawler, bound for Rome with other convicts and a few paying passengers. His name was Paul. He said God had spoken to him in visions. He also knew boats, storms, and men. The centurion in charge, Julius, kept his key ring and his distance. It was late in the season, after the fast, when the sea stops asking and starts taking. At Fair Havens on Crete, the crew argued for a short hop west to Phoenix, a better harbor for winter. Paul warned them, gently, then plainly, that the voyage would cost cargo, ship, and a life. Mariners hear many prophecies. Prophet talks louder. They loosed the lines on a southerly breeze, sails fat with hope, and slid along the coast until the world went wrong. The wind struck from the northeast like a thrown door, Euraquilo, the Euroclydon, and the ship tilted into a long scream. Canvas snapped, rigging sang, the helmsman lost the angle and the grain hull slewed into open water. Men cursed into wet beards, then crossed themselves by reflex and hauled. The little island of Cauda gave them one moment of lee to drag the ship's boat aboard before it filled and vanished. They frapped the hull, passing cables under and around to cinch the timbers. Depth shrank, the keel felt the bite of shoal, then deeper again, as if the sea were playing with them. Night fell without stars. Food went untouched. They began to throw weight, first cargo, then tackle. On the second day, even the professionals stopped talking like professionals. A prisoner bailed with a bucket. A soldier heaved beside him. Rank ran out through scuppers like rain. On the third day, they jettisoned the gear that made them a ship. After many nights without sun or certainty, hope thinned to threads. Paul stood when most men were sitting. He did not scold, he reminded. "You should have listened," he said, "not to score the point, but to set the next. Yet now I urge you to take heart. Not a life among you will be lost, only the ship. An angel of the God to whom I belong stood by me and said we must run aground on some island." He said it with a steadiness that did not sound like theater. Julius watched him, the way a man watches a compass he did not know he owned. On the 14th night, the sailors heard surf where there should have been distance. Leadsmen sounded, 20 fathoms, then 15. Anchors went down from the stern, 4 teeth to hold them off the rocks until light. Some crewmen tried a quiet escape in the boat on the pretext of laying more anchors. Paul saw the lie in the posture. He told Julius, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." A centurion does not often take orders from a chained man, but Julius cut the ropes and let the boat fall away into the dark. Paul broke bread before dawn. He blessed it, broke it, and urged all 276 souls to eat. Men with raw hands and floating stomachs chewed, and the chewing sounded like a promise. When they had eaten, they threw the grain into the sea to lighten the hull, their last wealth cast into gray water without ceremony. At first light they saw a bay with a beach and made for it, cutting the anchors, loosening the rudder bands, raising a spit of canvas to guide the wreck. They never reached the beach. The bow struck a sandbar and stuck fast. The stern swung in the breaker's fist and began to come apart. Soldiers argued the terrible arithmetic of empire: kill the prisoners so none could flee a Roman sentence. Julius, who had come to value the life of one man, saved the rest by deciding to spare him. "Those who can swim jump first," someone shouted. "The rest, boards and pieces." And so, a grain ship ended in splinters and paddling men. They washed ashore on an island they did not recognize. The locals called it Malta. Cold rain took hold, and strangers made a fire large enough to gather a ship's worth of men. Paul fetched brushwood, a viper driven by heat, fastened on his hand. The islanders watched for him to swell and fall. He shook the snake into the flames and kept building the fire. Their expectations shifted, from murderer spared by sea, caught by justice, to a god walking. He called himself neither. He visited the chief man's house. The chief's father lay with fever and dysentery. Paul prayed, laid hands, and the fever left. Others came sick and left walking. A shipwreck gave an island clinics and the ship's survivors cover and food. Winter held them 3 months. They bartered repairs and waited for a figurehead with the right wind. They found one, a ship of Alexandria bearing the twins Castor and Pollux on its prow, patron saints of sailors who had nothing to do with the god Paul served. Julius secured passage. When they left, the islanders laid gifts on the beach: food, cloth, small tools, a warmth against the memory of cold surf. The sea that had been enemy became road again. They moved north by stages: Syracuse, Rhegium, Puteoli. Word outran them on Roman roads, and believers came walking south along the Appian Way to meet the man they had known only by letter. Paul saw them and thanked God and took courage. Chains came with him into the capital. They put him under guard in a rented house where visitors came and went. He explained the kingdom to anyone who would listen: soldiers, elders, skeptics, and spoke of a Messiah who had also been tried, chained, and declared dangerous by men whose authority was smaller than they believed. Acts tells the story without embroidery, but any sailor can tell you the details in the gaps: the stink of soaked rope, the way bread tastes on a stomach that has only bile, the sound an anchor makes when you cut it free and trust that you will not need it again, the silence after a hull stops creaking because it is no longer a hull. The human arithmetic: 276 aboard, none lost. Not because the sea was kind, the sea was not, but because a warning was heeded, a lie was stopped, and courage was contagious at the moment it mattered. That is the crime and the divine of it. Men with power gambled lives for a schedule. A prisoner with a word from God told the truth. A centurion learned what leadership looks like in a storm. A community of strangers on a cold island chose hospitality over suspicion. The wreck was real. Timber on a bar, cargo gone, plans broken. The salvation was just as real. Every name on a manifest answering at a roll call in the rain. Stand on a winter beach and listen to surf hitting a sandbar beyond your sightline. Imagine a black sea, a bow fixed like a nailed hymn, and a man in chains telling armed men not to be afraid because he has heard from the Lord of the sea and the land. Picture a centurion choosing mercy over policy and finding that mercy returns to him in the count of survivors. Picture the fire, the snake in the brush, the hands that do not stop working because faith is not a mood. Picture Rome ahead and still decide to rebuild your courage here, on the sand, with salt on your lips and splinters in your palms. Back on the beach, someone counted again to be sure: 276. A soldier swore he had never been so happy to hear men coughing. Another kissed the sand and laughed at himself for doing it. The sea took the ship. It did not take the names. Julius kept the key ring, but he also kept Paul within arm's reach, as if the man who had steered him through the storm might be needed for the city ahead. And the sailors, hard men with salt in their hair, remembered the night they cut loose anchors and discovered that hope floats on smaller things: a plank, a prayer, a voice saying, "Eat and live." Thank you for listening to Divine Crime. Subscribe for more true stories from the most dangerous book ever written.